Good morning. Good morning. Today is October the 7th. And today, this Monday morning, we have a special podcast. I guess everyone is special. Every episode is special. We have a special podcast this morning regarding how we are to speak, bridling the tongue. And I know that we have discussed a topic very similar to this, but I do have some further questioning. And so today we're going to be talking about how we can bridle the tongue. When to speak, how to speak, when to keep silent, that kind of thing. You are listening this morning to the Dear Church podcast.
Bum, ba-dum, bum. That's our new.
Then no one will see us. There's no reason for a podcast because... Welcome to the Dear Church podcast, where we exist to fill your ears and your minds with the study of God to see the world as disciples of Christ. My name is Sam Yang, and we have with us Pastor Eugene of the Church Gathered and Scattered.
So are you.
I'm not really like a pastor, though.
Oh, you will be.
That's true.
You will be an elder.
That's true.
Yeah, and then ordained sometime next year. Minimum 2 years.
I don't know. Maybe. Who knows? Who knows? But what I do know is what we'll talk about this morning.
Maximum 2 years.
It might be like minimum. I think it's more like a minimum, like 3 at this point. I don't know. Who knows? But what I do know is what we were talking about this morning. And this morning we were going to discuss how we discern when to speak, how to speak, when to keep silent. And the reason why I want to go into this a little bit more is because I think whenever we talk about speech or bridling the tongue, we say that it's up to the person's wisdom and discernment. But I wanted to just kind of go into that a little bit more, poke the bear, if you will, I think people say.
Okay.
So we're going to talk about that. And this topic is brought up because today we live not only in a world, but in a culture where speaking up is valued. You know, you speak up for what is right. And I think what is oftentimes neglected, because we want to speak up for what is right, oftentimes we neglect wisdom, good sense, and even courtesy to speak what is on your mind, or even sometimes what is actually correct. And you know, it makes you think, it makes you wonder, should you speak at all times? Should we? Like, if something is wrong, do we absolutely have to speak up? And that's the question that we'll talk about this morning. And I wanted to go through some Bible verses this morning, and this has to do with our topic, obviously. And first is James 1:19. It reads, "Know this, my beloved brothers, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger." And so that's what we're discussing, how to be slow to speak. And this is Matthew chapter 12, verse 36 to 37. "I tell you, on the day of judgment, people will give account for every careless word they speak. For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned." Colossians 4:6, "Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person." And speaking, considering the dangers of the tongue, Proverbs 21:23 reads, "Whoever keeps his mouth and his tongue keeps himself out of trouble." And James 1:26 reads, "If anyone thinks he is religious and does not bridle his tongue, but deceives his heart, this person's religion is worthless." And so we know that words are important. Every word, the Bible says, every careless word we'll have to give account for it. And so I guess the question is, we live in a world today where we're speaking what you feel, speaking what you think is right, that's valued. And I want to give a little bit of context too, because I think, oftentimes we might think, this person at church wronged me, so I'm just going to say what's on my mind. Like, this is how you wronged me. Or I'm just going to speak my mind, whatever the context it might be. Or maybe even, I don't trust our church leaders. I'm just going to speak however I want to them, regardless of who they are, regardless of their context, whatever it might be. I'm just going to say whatever I want because it is right in my mind. But there's a discernment again. And so just kind of having that foundation, where do we get this discernment on knowing how to speak, when to speak, what to say when it comes to what to say? You know, here's the thing. I have this entire thing written out. I have a lot of different things written out, but I just feel like I'm speaking too much, you know? So let me just say this then. I know I already said like, oh, this is the reason why we brought this up. But another reason why I bring this up now in our current context is because I think in Asian culture, it's respectable for you to stay quiet. Asians are sometimes viewed as like the quiet, shy, not speaking up types. And so today, as Asian Americans, we have people that actively seek to go against that. And in response, they overreach. And so they speak up for everything and they pride themselves on it. We think it's brave or courageous. I'm going to speak up when no one else will. You know, we think we're the main character of every Disney movie, but sometimes it's wiser not to speak up. Mm-hmm. It's better not to say what's on the tip of your tongue, but to pray and meditate, then privately, quietly bring it up to the individual, right? Mm-hmm. But because of our background and our upbringing, we want to go against that, and we think it's so courageous for us to just say whatever's on our mind, and that's what is good, and that's what distinguishes me from other people. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I bring this up.
Now, quietness is a great quality.
Yeah.
It's a super quality. To live a quiet and peaceful life is something that you would aim for, like Paul would say. Loud and brazen, or loud and defiant, that we see in Proverbs chapter 7, is associated with the rebellious, the adulterous. So loudness is not necessarily a quality that you want or a characteristic you want attributed to you. You don't want to be labeled as someone that's loud.
Yeah.
But you do want to be able to speak up when the time calls for it. But for the most part, you want to stay quiet. You would like to stay quiet. I think that is a Christian's heart, to stay quiet, unless they have been, so to speak, called to speak, so to say, you know.
So I guess someone could respond by saying, well, okay, well, on, October 31st, which is coming up, we celebrate Reformation Day, right? And actually on October 27th, we will have our Reformation Family Fall Festival at our church.
Fun.
Did I miss fun? Mm-hmm. It is also fun. So Reformation Family Fall Festival, which is fun, is the name of the event happening.
It follows the fellowship.
Following fellowship.
Yeah.
And that's happening on October 27th. But, someone could say, well, okay, we celebrate Martin Luther because he spoke up, right? At the same time, it doesn't mean that every Christian today, every Protestant today should be nailing their theses on every Roman Catholic cathedral or church.
Yeah, but that's not the first go-to. So he didn't do that right from the get-go. He tried to have a conversation. He tried to bring it to the elders of that church, the bishops. He tried to bring it up for discussion, for debate. And he got shot down. Yeah. That's why he had to come to a point. Well, he was pushed to a point where he nailed his 95 Theses on the Wittenberg doors, right? Mm-hmm. And that the nailing isn't like an act of defiance. The nailing was saying, I want to debate these topics. Yeah. That's what they normally did. It was defiant in the sense where the church didn't allow him to bring these topics up. But that's why when he brought it up, he was able to have these discussions. He was able to put out the things that he did in his discoveries. After reading the Word of God, he would even come out in the Diet of Worms, which was poised against him. They wanted him to recant and repent, but he didn't. Yeah. He stood on the Word of God. And so I don't think that was his first go-to. I think he wanted to, like the Apostle Paul, wanted to live a quiet life. He was a monk.
Yeah.
And so when he was out there, the reason why we celebrate someone like that is also because he had to speak out, and when he spoke out, he did. he didn't shy away from what he had to do
when the opportunity came.
Yeah. But, the characteristic of loud and defiant is not something that you want attributed to yourself. You don't want to be loud and defiant. You don't want to be like, oh, this person, he or she is always loud, always speaking up, always talking. That's not it. And that's what we see in, a lot of our younger folk perhaps today, but that's what's being put out, in our social media pages. You have to speak out. You have to
speak
do
your
this.
Truth.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And then everybody has to X something or tweet something. Everybody has to post what they feel on their social media accounts. And have we gotten better for it? I think we've gotten dumber for it.
So, I mean, the question is, though, like, then when are we supposed to speak up? And this is kind of, I think, a question that a lot of our listeners may have is, okay, Martin Luther spoke up when it counted, when the opportunity was given. How can we discern when that opportunity is? So, for example, let's just say my brother wrongs me. I don't speak up because I'm like, I'm just going to let it pass. Wrongs me again. I'll let it pass. Wrongs me 5 times. Now, at this point, he might not even have wronged me that badly, but it's built up to the point where now I'm exploding. And so it's come to a point where now I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to say what I want to say. And so it's not a wisdom call, but it's stacked up, right? Should I have addressed it the first time? Should I have addressed it like the second time? Where is the right time to address it? How do I discern when to speak? And how do I know when's the opportunity that God has given me?
Yeah, it does take discernment. I think we need to know what's bad first, what's terrible, what's really, really something that we need to go against as far away as possible. And one of the Bible verses that really stand out when talking about this isn't just James 1:19 is really good.
Yeah.
Is that James 1:19? Yeah. That's in the same verse number, Proverbs chapter 10, verse 19 is really good.
Proverbs chapter 10, verse 19 reads, when words are many, transgression is not lacking, but whoever restrains his lips is prudent.
The more you talk, this is how I take it, the more you talk, the more sure it will be that you will sin.
Yeah, like you're getting closer and closer to it.
It's almost like it's saying it's an absolute certainty. The more you talk, you will sin.
Yeah.
There's going to be something untruthful that's going to be said because how do you have so many words to say? And so when you're talking with somebody, let's say you're having a conversation or you're with a group of friends, you don't want to be the quiet one. You want to keep lively. You basically become the clown of that group. You want to entertain.
Yeah.
Those people that talk a lot, they tend to embellish, exaggerate, fudge, some of the facts here and there. Those are all, like we talked about last week, those are false witnesses, unnecessary false witnesses. And so that's a sin. And then you're going to bring sin into that group, into that conversation. I think quiet people are prudent in the sense where at least you don't give yourself occasion to sin.
Yeah.
So that's how I take it. James 1:19 takes that a step further, which in my opinion is brilliant, where you're supposed to be slow to speak, quick to listen, and then slow to anger. Is that the progression for James 1:19? Slow to speak, quick to listen?
Quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger.
Oh, quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger.
Yeah.
And so before you get to that, I think that's where that progression comes. So if you're not talking, it's not like you're on your phone. So you have a group of friends. Let's say we have a bunch of friends over.
Yeah.
It's not like you're on your phone because you don't want to talk. Oh, there's no occasion to sin if I'm on my phone. That's not the point.
Right.
But you're more listening. You want to listen. I think that is a problem for a lot of people. It's not just modern day. I'm talking about throughout history. It's been a problem. People have a problem listening. So if you want prudence, if you want wisdom, listen first.
Yeah.
Always be listening,
Yeah.
And so if you're always listening, then, you are measuring, you're weighing, you're considering. And then even if you want to jump in, James continues on, be slow to speak.
Yeah.
Measure those words like twice, 3 times, 4 times. Continue to measure it. And then don't be angry about it when you speak.
Yeah.
But when you have to speak, you have to speak, right? Isn't that the case? When you have to speak, you have to speak. And so there will be times when you are going to be compelled to speak, that you should, that it would be prudent for you to speak. But for the most part, what you want to recognize is, in the end, and this is what James 20 gets into, you want to be able to produce the righteousness of God. That's what James 20 says. So why don't you do these things? Because these things do not produce the righteousness of God. So what you want to do is you want to produce the righteousness of God. So in your speech, in your actions, the way you respond, it will be that. So Martin Luther absolutely had to speak because it was part of producing the righteousness of God. So again, the standard has to be there. And if you don't have the standard, then you don't know even what, you don't know why you're keeping silent. Maybe you're keeping silent because you're dumb. But at the same time, you're dumb because you're not listening, you're not weighing, you're not considering, you're not mulling these things over in your heart and your mind, which is what you're supposed to do. You just tune people out when they talk. That's a bad thing. That's a bad thing. When someone talks, you should listen. And if you're listening, you're weighing, you're considering, you're measuring, you're doing all these things. And after you've weighed that in your heart, you're slow. That way you're slow to speak. And then when you give a measured response, it's not an anger, it's not through emotion. But it is a wise way of responding. So I think those are the things that I would probably consider first. And it's not just about us, it's not an absolute standard. You should be quiet in everything. That's not the standard. I want a quiet life, meaning that is the normal pattern. But when things get bad, people have to speak up. I think we are at a time when things are pretty bad, that people should be speaking up. You shouldn't be staying quiet when someone wants to indoctrinate your children with perversion. If it's in your schools and then it's in the children's libraries, you should be speaking up. Absolutely. Absolutely. When someone says that, I want to use this euphemism and call it women's health care, you should speak up because it's not. You're directly going against the sanctity of life. And this is something that your wife prayed today, that when we want order returned to our country, one of the primary things is to have a God-fearing person. And I'm obviously paraphrasing, but she used the words, the sanctity of life. That's someone that we want. We want someone in our leadership that understands the sanctity of life. And if they don't understand the sanctity of life, they don't understand the Imago Dei. They don't understand where our rights come from. Our rights come from our Creator. The founding fathers knew this. Everybody knows this. Our rights are not given to us by someone above us. They're given to us by someone, or the God who is, entirely sovereign, entirely over us. It's not given to us by our government.
I think that's helpful. But it makes me wonder, because it almost makes it seem like you're saying that we need to have a filter on when we speak. And I believe that's true. But is that all the time? Like, can't we just kind of let it go once in a while? Do I have to have a filter on when I speak with my wife? Do I have to have a filter on when I speak with my closest friend? I get it. You can have a filter on when you're at church, when you're at work, when you're with, maybe new believers, maybe people that you're not that close with. But when you're with your boys, can't you just let loose a little bit? Is that so bad?
Yeah. I think this is what a lot of people feel. And sometimes people even think that, this person is unfiltered, as if it was a good thing.
It's raw. It's real.
Don't we even I don't know, idolize? I don't know what the word is.
Tell us how you really feel. That's what people say.
I remember was it Anna Kendrick?
Pitch Perfect 1 and 2. Maybe 3.
Jennifer Lawrence. There are all these
J-Lo.
people whose image is based on, they're kind of unfiltered, right? They just say
they're
what's
so
on their,
real. Yeah.
And so a lot of people wanted to emulate that. They respected it. They held them in high esteem, right? I don't think that's the Christian way. I'm not saying anything bad about these characters, but to emulate that characteristic about a person
Right.
is not Christian. You don't just say anything on your mind. You always measure it. Yes, even the closest people, you would still measure, always. And when you recognize that, you have to, because the aim is the righteousness of God. It's not to sin, but to promote righteousness, okay?
Yeah.
If that's the aim, then you will realize, when you continue to read James, you will realize that you are now, not only have you recognized this, so when you recognize it in the first 2 chapters of James, by the time you get to chapter 3, we see that the tongue is an unbridled fire.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's uncontrollable.
Yeah.
It destroys everything in its path. It is an impossibility to control the tongue. That's what you get at James 3. In fact, it goes down to James 3 and says, and connects the tongue with the wisdom of the world, which is demonic. So that's the last part, where the wisdom of the world is earthly, and it goes down to demonic. So that's what happens with the tongue. Once you recognize how evil the tongue can be and is, and you try to bridle that, you realize the impossibility of the situation that you're in. It's impossible to bridle the tongue completely, of course, but it's impossible to bridle the tongue. So knowing that, are you going to continue to spread fire everywhere? Like it says in Proverbs, where you're shooting firebrands at someone's house and goes, "Oh, just kidding," right?
Yeah.
That's what it means when you're like joking and being sarcastic, and you go, "Oh, it was just a joke," you know. Haven't you ever heard of sarcasm? That kind of thing.
Like, "Oh, you're so ugly." Just kidding.
Yeah,
like that.
Exactly. It's exactly that.
Yeah.
And I hear that a lot from particularly one of our staffers.
He's in Korea right now, though.
I don't think Brian have ever said anything sarcastic.
That's hyperbole. Brian.
But yeah, once you recognize that, you realize the need for a savior. You realize the need for sanctification. You realize the need for a new spirit, a new heart, a heart of flesh. And this is something that the Lord promises his children, they will get a new heart, a heart of flesh.
Right.
They will get a new spirit. They will be able to put on the characteristics of God. And those are things that you're continually promised. And that is the promise that we have in sanctification as we go to glorification, our perfected bodies and souls, right? And so when you look toward that, you start to change. And you can only do that in perfection if you're in Christ. That is what the Bible is showing us.
But what if there's something that I really want to get off my chest, but now you're telling me I can't. I'm gonna explode. Like, you're telling me I can't even tell my wife.
A lot of times, let's say you go to that. A lot of times you say that, and then
me?
I'm saying people will say stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then when they do it, don't they end up regretting it? Like, think about personally.
Yeah.
What you've been through. It's like, I just got to get this off my chest, and you do. Don't you end up regretting it so many times? And if not, then aren't you just deluding yourself? You're just lying to yourself that you don't regret it, because you ended up hurting people. You ended up saying things where the full picture wasn't given.
Yeah.
You know, you could say, "Man, you have an ugly face."
Oh,
and then
that's tough.
Maybe that wasn't the full picture. You meant to say something more in context. I don't know. Why would you say? You gotta hold it back. Stop telling people they have an ugly face if that's the first thing that you think of, because that's exactly how I kind of grew up in Queens. People would say things like, "I don't like your face." If they don't like your face, they will say it to you right then and there. That means you and that person will never be friends. Never.
Because of your face.
Because of your face. You have a face that I don't like. I don't like your face. And that's what we would say.
What if you wore a mask? Yeah, that's tough.
And so those are things that I don't think would ever be beneficial.
Yeah.
If you're like, you just got to be raw, you just got to be real. I don't know what that even means. You mean real as in your real righteous self that you want to promote, or real as in you want to continue to promote depravity? the depraved thoughts in your mind, the perverse things that you have in your heart, you want to promote that, you want to communicate that, you want to be able to project those things. Because if that's the case, I got to tell you, that's exactly what James 3 says. By a small rudder, the whole ship is controlled. That thing that you say your body and your soul will be controlled by, and that wisdom of the world will lead you to hell, the fiery pits of hell. Your life will not become better for it. Your life will become hell for it. And that's what I'm going to tell you. Like, I don't care who you think is cool or you want to emulate this person so raw. They just say what's on their mind. If that's the case, then look at their life 10 years from now, 20 years from now. If they're still the same, you will see this truth being played out in their life. Their life will be unstable. Their life will be destroyed. Their life will not have any kind of semblance of balance or of peace, but it will be turbulent because you have to be able to control the tongue to have any kind of peace.
So where is the wisdom then in knowing when to say a good thing and when to hold back a good thing? And so a perfect example is, I just have two examples, and they're a little different. I used to serve at another church, and at the previous church that I was serving at, a parent of the youth group came up to me, and they bragged. You know, they were bragging, and they said, people, I can say whatever is on my mind to the head pastor. I don't have a problem with it. People are like, oh, how can you say this? How can you say this to the head pastor? But I don't care. I say what's on my mind. And I thought to myself, what a foolish man. Because this person is bragging about the fact that they can just waltz into the head pastor's office and just say whatever's on their mind. And that was a bragging point for them. And so their lack of discernment and lack of wisdom was something that was, for them, a point of pride. And I thought that's a really interesting thing to say to me, who was in ministry as well.
Well, I mean, they're I don't know who this person is, obviously, but I can say with a good amount of certainty that their position will not last.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're like, people like that don't last in that seat of influence or power or authority.
Right. Because
you have to be able to know that the more influence you have, what you say matters so much. So even if, like, let's say we're talking about, I don't know, critiquing another person, maybe even their sermons. I don't know. So Junseok telling you something, and critiquing your sermons has a different weight than if I tell you something. Mm-hmm. It's absolutely true, because we're in different positions. Right. So if you have a seat of influence and you don't know how to bridle your tongue, and I just say whatever I want, and I just continue to trash on your sermons or your devotions or whatever you do, it actually can kill your spirit as well. But it's different from a friend doing that. Right. And so I guess the question is, how do we approach leadership? Because I think this is another thing that people may wonder about. Because let's just say, a leader says something and I don't particularly agree. And I'm wondering if it's just me, or I'm just wondering, like, if I could speak to a leader concerning this, right? And so I bring it up to the leader. How do I know when to do that and how to do that? Because on the one side, there's that one side that I just gave you, where it's just like, you know what, I'm going to say whatever. Hey, Pastor so-and-so, your sermon was terrible. What are you thinking about? Did you even pray? Did you prepare? There's that side, right? Mm-hmm. There's another side where it's like, oh, I can't dare walk into that office. He's a pastor. I'm just a man. I can't do that. There's these two extremes where one is almost idolizing the pastor and the pastor's role, and the other is the overreaction against that. This is just a man. It just went to seminary. That's all that's different between me and him. And I've even heard this. The pastor's job is to simply tell me where the food is. We're all men. And so how do we find the wisdom and discernment to be able to speak to a leader, especially when we disagree? No, obviously, when you have, so this is what I've been thinking about a lot for even my family. I have a larger family, extended family. Yeah. So when I tell people I have, like, I don't know, cousins, like 20 or 30 cousins I have 3 in the States, right? Yeah. In this area, in the tri-state area, then people are like, whoa. Oh, just in this area? Yeah. I have 3 globally. We have a big family. Yeah. And so when I tell people like that, they get kind of surprised. But I've been thinking about that. I've been thinking about what that means and the traditions that we hold, how to speak and things like that. But I want to go back to honoring your father and mother. When you honor your father and mother, you recognize the traditions that you were brought up with. And this is something that we don't necessarily have. When you do that, though, you start to understand authority and respect authority. Because God placed them in that. You give them the proper due.
Right.
Or, respect. Even Jesus would go give to Caesar what's Caesar's, because he has a certain authority that has been imbued by God. God gave Caesar that authority.
Right.
And so, obviously now, we understand that the rock came and smashed the entire statue in Daniel's vision. So right now, Jesus is king over everything. And that's who we ought to give that due honor, respect, follow, things like that. I think when you understand that, the other levels or the hierarchy of authority, you view a little differently. So you don't view, let's say, a pastor like you would view God.
Right.
But at the same time, he's not just a fellow man. But I would go further. I would say treat your boss with that kind of respect. Treat whoever is above you or superior at work with that kind of respect. I think you don't. I think it goes back to you respecting your parents. Oh, I respect my parents, blah, 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 I do that. Then if you understood that and you truly respected your parents, then you would have to make that connection unless you don't sit and think about it. Maybe you don't think and sit about it, but I urge you to do that. Be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger. So let that weigh on you a little bit. You say you respect your father or mother, then let that weigh on you. What does that mean? And the reason why God really put that as the fifth commandment, tying in, what's in the world with the 6 to 10, and with God in 1 to 4, how it's smack dab in the middle, is because you see that authority comes from God. And that's who you disrespect when you disrespect authority. And I get it. People can abuse and people can really harm those that they're supposed to protect and serve and to administer good leadership to. And I get that. And we live in a time where it's pretty rampant, but it doesn't mean we don't give them their due respect. That's like if I went to, this is why I don't agree with the whole let's go Brandon thing. And so obviously let's go Brandon is a euphemistic way of putting the other term that people have been chanting.
Right.
We don't do that. And at the same time, the flip side, I remember when Donald Trump became president, people used to hashtag in Facebook a lot, not my president.
Yep.
You may not like him, but that's not what you do. With authority comes a level of respect that we ought to give. And I'm not just talking about the pastors here, but we don't treat them like God. We don't treat them like Jesus, but we give them due respect and honor because of God and because of Jesus. Because Jesus is king, we do that. And so I think that's how you can stay away from those two extremes. I just don't think we have that extreme. I don't see the extreme of people going, I can't step into the pastor's office because it's too holy. I've not seen that extreme. No. I think we're more on the other extremes. Like we just need to be raw. I could tell the pastor whatever I want because he and I are buds or he's just a man. Right. Obviously, he's just a man. But you see, when James, a lot of this is going back to James chapter 5.
I love James.
It says, and Elijah, God heard Elijah's prayers. He hears the prayers of a righteous man. Yep. Elijah was a man just like us. Mm-hmm. Does it mean you don't respect Elijah? I doubt that's what James meant. I think it's the direct opposite of it. It's because you respect Elijah so much that you should try to emulate him because he was also a man. Right. Try to emulate Elijah. Pray like Elijah because God answered Elijah's prayers because God listens to the prayers of the righteous. And so pray and be righteous. And so I think that was his point. Not like Elijah was a man just like us. He's just a schlub. He sins just like, that's not the point of that statement.
Right.
And I think we miss the context when we think like that. So when you think someone of authority, especially someone of a spiritual authority, is just like us, he's just a schlub, I think you missed the point. The point is, that person of authority should be someone that you try to emulate. This is why I think a lot of people don't want to be elders anymore, because not only do the elders not stand up to the scrutiny that they should, I get that, but also when they do stand up, they should be emulated and they should be respected. They should be honored. You should give that elder due honor. And the person that preaches double honor. You know, there's an intrinsic honor or implicit honor that you're supposed to give an elder. Why is that the case? It's not because the elder in himself is good. It's because God has placed him in that position. And when you give a good, righteous person honor, that person will be propelled, that he will be strengthened, encouraged, ignited even to give back to the people that he's supposed to serve all his energy, all his strength, all his prayers, his studies, his passion, and things like that.
Yeah. And so what you're saying is, and this has to do with the broader topic that we've been talking about in how we speak, whether it's to our wife, whether it's to our husband, whether it's to, our friends, our brother or sister, whoever it may be, or even our pastor. When we say anything, when we open our mouths to speak, we must always be in control, and we must always do it prayerfully and in a manner that's pleasing to God, right? And even David says, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be pleasing to you, right? And so we want our words, every
Psalm
single
19,
word.
Yep.
Psalm 19. Every single word, we want it to be pleasing to the Lord.
That's the goal. The goal is the righteousness of God.
Right.
That's the goal.
Right.
The goal isn't you being the center.
Yeah.
So even if you look at the 10 Commandments, you're never the center. You, like you said, you're not the main character. You start off with God, then you start off with the authority figures, then you go to your neighbors. It's always other-centered, especially putting God as number one. Yeah. When you put yourself as center, that is demonic. That is satanic. And so, the Satanic Temple's motto is do what thou wilt. That's the Satanic Motto's temple. That's their mantra. Satanic Temple's, motto. Yeah. And so do what thou wilt is do what you want to do. Say what you want to say. Be raw, be real. That literally is the mantra of the Satanic Temple. So be careful who you emulate, because you might literally be emulating satanic principles instead of God's principles.
Someone, though, might respond to you and say, why are you trying to silence me? I've been taught through studying history, even at school, I've been taught to speak my mind, right? And again, that's how what we value. Are you trying to silence me?
Yeah, I think this is where the discernment is truly important. And, in our day and age, it can be the signs of it being severely lacking. Yeah. Yeah. There are times to speak and there's a time to stay quiet. It's very simple. Ecclesiastes chapter 3. What did Kamala Harris say? Ecclesiastical. So in Ecclesiastical chapter 3, there's a time to speak and there's a time to stay silent. Knowing the difference is key. But to think that there's only times to speak is going to be to your detriment. It will lead to your downfall. And I can't help but to advise against it. Yeah. If anything, Proverbs teaches us that it's prudent then just to stay silent. If you're not sure, then our default should be to stay silent. If you're going to err on silence. Yep. Not on being loud and brash and brazen. Yep. That's not the side you should err on. And if you need more wisdom, that's why James 1:5 talks about asking God for wisdom, because he's gracious. He will give it to us. And so ask the Lord for wisdom and discernment. And if you're going to err on silence, err on quietness. And if you realize, I should have spoken up, then you need to speak up. Yeah. But you shouldn't err on being loud and brazen. That should not be your defining characteristic. It shouldn't be the image that you have. And that's not something that we should emulate in anybody.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I think that's really helpful. And again, this isn't saying that we should not speak up, but it's having the wisdom and the discernment to know when to speak up and how to do it. And I think that's, again, like if our heart is for the edification, the sanctification, the strengthening of the other, rather than vindicating ourselves, let's say, then we are to, in our speech with that, we are to glorify the Lord. So speaking of speech, I'm very tongue-tied today.
Oh, you didn't have coffee?
No, I did.
You're lacking caffeine?
Maybe.
Tongue is stiff.
I don't know if that's I don't think it can be.
You should do those exercises that a lot of musicians, vocalists, even actors do. I heard Matthew McConaughey has an accent. Did you mention him today?
An accent?
And no, the actor has some kind of thing that he goes through, like a regimen.
Really?
Yeah, he beats his chest and he starts like humming low tones.
Speaking of Matthew McConaughey, this is the last question regarding this topic is social media is huge now, right? Keyboard warriors are huge. We're not technically speaking, right? Because when you're typing, you're not really speaking. But the keyboard warrior era is here and it's thriving. I'm curious, even with this, where do we get our discernment? So let me give you an example. The other day, I saw a video of someone, and this is someone that I know. And in the video, they say something along the lines of, this is really annoying. This debate's been going on. It's really annoying to me, so I'm just going to respond to it. So obviously, off the bat, I'm like, okay, this is a very prideful kind of attitude. This is very annoying to me. And even the voice, like, this is very annoying to me, but I'm going to respond to it because everyone's talking about it. Can women be pastors, or can they not be pastors? There is Bible verses there's Bible texts that support both sides. And then he pretty much says, but some people believe they do, some people they can't. It's okay. Just we're supposed to love each other. Something like that, right? And so it's incorrect what he's saying. And so I was very, very tempted to respond, whether even it's commenting on the video or even just DMing this person saying, can you give me one? I'll give you at least two right now. Can you give me one verse that supports that women can be pastors? And I decided not to do it because I thought, what's the point of doing this? But then in my mind, I'm like, okay, but he's like poisoning the minds of these young people in our area. And I didn't know.
In our area.
I didn't know what to do. And it's something that I'm literally still thinking about. Like, because I'm not trying to call him out. I mean, I think it's wrong, but I wanted to just DM this person and be like, hey, let's have a discussion because I actually don't think this is right. So I was considering DMing this person and just personally talking to them and kind of, have a conversation about what they're thinking. I didn't want to shame the person on his comment or whatever. But I guess that's the question, right? It's when we see stuff like that on Instagram, when we see stuff like this on social media, the question is, do we comment or do we not comment? Is this going to make a difference? Is this wise? Is this good? How do we filter and discern through these thoughts?
Yeah, no, that's a good one. A lot of times we do things case by case.
Yeah, that's
true. I think we want to always, paint things over with a broad brush. That's not a good thing. And so a lot of things are case by case. So depending on the actual case, we may take different measures to respond. Mm-hmm. Ordaining women pastors is on another level because I think you can be on the side of the egalitarian camp where you think ordaining women pastors is not only acceptable, but it's a good thing. Mm-hmm. And then you could be on the side of complementarianism, which is, the camp that it's been titled and called now, where ordaining women pastors is going against what the Bible says.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so it's a bad thing. And then now there's a person that's trying to be on the third camp. Says they're both okay. Stop talking about it.
Right. It's annoying.
It's annoying. I would think that third camp is probably the most ignorant and the most dangerous.
Yeah.
Because these two camps can't have fellowship. Mm-hmm. That's how extremely divided and opposing these views are. Because people are like, whoa, I thought, so this is where I was before. I thought about it too. This is where our church entirely was too. Is, if it's a woman pastor, just call her pastor. It's fine. We want to respect that, honor that kind of thing. So if that's the case, would you, in the name of unity, solidarity, in the name of fellowship and ecumenism, that kind of thing, would you submit to a woman pastor? And you go, no. Okay, would you take communion from a woman pastor? What would you do? And the answer is nothing.
Yeah.
You wouldn't subject yourself to a woman pastor because you don't believe that's actually biblical, and that person is in rebellion against the word by becoming ordained, and that body that ordains the woman is also in rebellion against the word.
Yeah.
Which is clear. This is not like a fuzzy matter. It was clearly stated. So when you reject that, you have to reject the clear sayings of the word. And so when you reject the clear, you will also reject easily what can be even slightly obscure, what can be a little bit mysterious. You'll reject all that easily because then you'll reject everything. And that's why the whole porneia thing, it's not really homosexuals now. We're talking about, contextually, we're talking about people back in the day where they were just having sex with each other. They're not talking about a loving monogamous relationship between same-sex couples like we have now, which is also ridiculous. And so, I don't want to get into that now, but we can, perhaps. But the whole thing is, if you reject that, can you have fellowship with someone that rejects what is clear in the Word? The fact is you can't. Not only would you not want to do that, that camp will not respect you. They'll never invite you to speak, even though you don't talk about complementarianism or egalitarianism at all.
Yeah.
They will never invite you to speak at an egalitarian camp, even though they will say that the gospel that they believe can be word for word the same as you. I don't get invited to egalitarian camps to speak. Does that make sense? So you don't have fellowship. I think that third way is probably the worst because you have not stayed, you have not measured, you have not seen why this is such a big fight, and you're just tired of the fight. Why can't we just all get along? There's a reason why we can't get along. It's about interpreting the Bible. And if you are arguing against what is clear in the Bible, then what else are you arguing against?
But the question is, then at what point do you speak up then? Because okay, if we believe that this is that big of an issue, which I think it is, because I think it's just wrong hermeneutics, which impacts the rest of how you read the Bible. If we believe it's that big of a deal, then shouldn't we constantly be talking about it with those that are egalitarian? Hey, this is wrong. You need to go away from your ways. And there are a lot of egalitarian churches around us. Should we be nailing the theses on the door? Should we be doing something or should we be commenting? Do we just stay silent? Is that the right thing to do?
I mean, personally speaking, yeah, don't nail anything on the doors of egalitarian churches.
No, that's tough. That's really tough.
Yeah.
That's a bad witness.
I think that's even vandalism. I'm not sure.
No, it is legally, I think. I'm not a lawyer or anything. I was close, but...
Close to being a lawyer or a doctor? I mean, you have to get your story straight.
Lawyer, doctor? Wasn't that Augustine? Yeah. Wasn't he a lawyer, doctor?
I think you're a lawyer, doctor.
Thank you.
But, yeah.
I don't even know what that means.
I think if occasion would give rise to conversation, and people are open to talking about it, that's great. I think us living out our doctrines fully, joyfully, as best we can, I think that is something that is a testament as well. Yeah. So there are all these things.
So even in that, you need discernment and wisdom. It doesn't just mean just because you disagree with another church theologically, you just nail your thoughts onto their door.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to do that, why don't you do that to the Roman Catholics? Why don't you do that to the Jehovah's Witnesses?
Right.
Why don't you do that to the Mormons?
Yeah.
I think people do. Do
they?
Oh, yeah. People like, who's that guy in Apologia Radio?
I don't know.
Jeff Durbin.
Turbin?
Durbin. You don't know who Jeff Durbin is?
I've heard the name. I thought it was Turban. Oh, that's a football player, I think. Sorry.
Yeah, so Jeff Durbin goes around and he does actually engage Mormon missionaries. He engages in a lot of people. And he's a huge pro-life advocate. He'll go and he'll talk to, pro-choice people. And there'll even be like violence sometimes or really, really bad rhetoric that goes back and forth.
That's tough, yeah.
Or that comes to him and he will respond. And so there are people like him around. Yeah. I'm not saying everybody should be like that. That's why there are people that are like that. But I think for the most part, people are not like that. Not everybody's a Jeff Durbin. Nor should they be. We can't have a million Jeff Durbins out there just, doing that. I think some people have been gifted and they're called and they're placed in situations like that. I think some people have been also called to do that and they're not doing that.
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying everything is one or everything's another. I am saying that discernment does take place. I'm sure Jeff Durbin will want more people at his side. I think if anything, we don't have enough people going out there and, protesting for life. I think more people should. One of the greater disappointments I have with the Christians and churches in our area, because we live in the New York City area, is when the George Floyd protests were happening, the riots were also happening. The churches in New York City got together to do a prayer or something like that.
Yeah.
And, people wanted to do that. People wanted to go on this prayer walk. And then when they went on it, they realized this is not what we thought it would be. Some of our ladies went to the Women's March back in, 2017 or something like that when it happened. And all these women would wear pink hats.
Yeah.
And so when they went and they came back, it's like, this is not what I thought it would be. And so we are starting to recognize that when people protest with secular means, they go all the way to the secular left. All of it is invited. But when you want any kind of semblance of, conservative biblical ideals, that is flat out rejected. So the Women's March did not invite any pro-life groups to their Women's March, even though they were pro-women. They wanted to help those women that are in need, that may be going through pregnancies and want to keep their baby. None of that. But if you want to kill your baby, join us in this quote-unquote Women's March.
Right.
And we're telling you, that destroys the woman. You having an abortion will destroy you because you are killing your baby knowingly, wantonly. Continuing to do that will destroy civilization. And so, same thing with like the whole women's pastors things. People don't know what to celebrate about women anymore. No longer do we celebrate like Adam celebrated Eve. She's going to be the mother of all children, mother of all the living, actually. And celebrating womanhood, or going to 1 Timothy chapter 2:15, where women will be saved by their childbearing.
Right.
And they use the word sozo, right? Which is saved. And you'd be like, well, I don't know what that means. So I just give up, like NT Ray. I don't know what that means. What could that mean?
Yeah.
It's like, what do you mean, what could that mean? It means that it's always pointing back to Christ. Christ is the center. Anytime we're talking about saved, Christ is the center. So Eve points to Christ. Our children now points back to Christ. Everything is about Christ. So when our mothers and our women, our wives have children, we are pointing back to Christ. We are celebrating that life because it points back to the life of Christ. We see God's image in our child, which also points back to Christ. Everything points back to Christ.
Right.
You kill a child, you are killing the image of God. You're taking away what God had intended to show the world, the image of God. Christ. Christ is the ultimate image of God. That's what we're to focus on. You don't get it. People like N.T. Wright who's fallen for this egalitarianism, you can't understand that. You lose a huge portion of our understanding of who Christ is, what Christ has brought for us, when you continue to say, we got to set up women pastors. Like, why are we elevating or thinking that we need to elevate women to these positions when they have already been elevated to the ultimate position that God has ordained for them, to raise our children, to give birth to our children, to not just continue to keep society going, but society successful for their prosperity. We need women for that. We need
Right.
good mothers for that. But instead of celebrating that, we want to get them back into the workforce because that's the highest thing that they could achieve
Right.
is CEO. Oh, no, it's not. Oh, no, it is not. And I hope people will understand it before it is too late. Look at the societies that have been successful. The more successful they are, the more they think that they don't need to have women in that respectable, honorable position that God has given them, but in a position of a man or something to that effect. And look at those societies. Those societies are now being threatened of annihilation, of death, of just being going into nothingness.
Yeah.
Like Korea, not just in like 100 years, in a generation or two, you'll have nobody because their birth rate is so low.
Yeah.
Japan, same thing. Because in our affluence, we think that we could go against what's natural, what God has ordered. And I think that is the principle that we have been foregoing. It's the principle of God. So it's not just a small matter when we say women can't be pastors. You're upturning the whole nature.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to argue.
Right,
so when you're saying,
right.
"Oh, do we go hammer it in the doors or things like that?" No. But we can speak about what is good and why that other thing that they're trying to promulgate is bad. We can say that though,
In appropriate contexts. Right?
Right.
We don't just barge in and just scream.
Yeah, please don't picket outside these churches.
No,
That's not what we are promoting.
Right.
But I gotta tell you, speak about what is good when the opportunity comes. And if it starts invading your doors or you are, prohibited from even going outside with these thoughts, then that's when people brought it out even more.
Yeah. And I think all of this, the moral of the story is watch your tongue in wisdom, right? That's just kind of, what's the point? Someone appreciated that I said that.
Okay.
They said, wow, you actually listened to the people. I said, absolutely.
You listen to the people.
Yeah, but it was just one person, but it was, you listened to the people. I said, yes, for sure. And so if we could wrap this up in a nice hallmark sentence, what is the point, Pastor Eugene?
The point is, if you want me to wrap it up in a sentence, here's the sentence.
Okay.
Listen to the podcast.
No, but like...
I think there's a danger in reducing everything to a sentence.
No, that's true. That's true.
You could try. You could try to summarize.
So in summary, I'll try my best to summarize. In summarizing, I believe that it is important to really just listen to the podcast.
I actually agree with that summary. You weren't being overly reductive there and simplifying a very complex concept.
No, but at the end of the day too, it's really about wisdom and discernment. And we are to know that our words, they must be measured, because like we read in Matthew, we will give account for every careless word we speak. And so in wisdom, in godly discernment, we are to watch our mouths and bridle our tongues, even from our other people that are closest to us to people that may not even know us. We have to bridle our tongue for the glory of God. That's a good one. That was good. That's why I'm here. That's why I get paid the big bucks from the podcast.
That's why you are here.
Yeah. That's a good one.
You do get paid the big bucks.
On occasion.
You get all these sponsors and endorsements.
No, I have zero sponsors and endorsements. So my friend was like, "Oh, I was like, yeah, like we get the big bucks for our podcast." Like, wow, you guys get money for the podcast? That's amazing. I was like, no, we paid to get this podcast up. What are you talking about?
Yeah. We spend our own time, our own money to do this.
Yeah.
There are zero sponsors. I think we got a small stipend from the church, but for the most part.
Yeah, we're in negative money right now. Yeah, this is not a good business proposal, because I'm really into business and e-commerce.
This is an investment so that people will listen and their sanctification is encouraged.
It's for the people.
It's for God. It's for the glory of God.
No, but that was, it's for God's glory, for the people, by the people. Speaking of America, we're going to move on to current events. So last week we had a debate between the vice president candidates, Tim Walz and J.D. Vance. Do you know what J.D. stands for?
Yeah.
So we had this vice presidential debate, and people really enjoyed this vice presidential debate. Not really commenting on what happened, but if you'd like a transcript of what happened, I have a link for that. One of the news major outlets, they actually have a transcript of the entire debate. And so you could see what they said there. But I wanted to bring up Matthew 25 because this is what Tim Walz brought up. And this was to talk about illegal immigration in the context of talking about the border package that was blocked by the Senate in May. And so he's saying this should have passed. Why didn't it pass? And, talking about this, he references Matthew 25. And this is what he said. I don't talk about my faith a lot, but Matthew 25:40 talks about, to the least among us, you do unto me. I think that's true of most Americans. They simply want order to it. This bill does it. It's funded, it's supported by the people who do it, and it lets us keep our dignity about how we treat other people. And so he talked about Matthew 25:40 in regards to illegal immigration. I know we've talked about this topic before, and I think we've talked about this exact verse, but since it was brought up, I thought it might be helpful for us to bring this up again. Is this an accurate understanding of Matthew 25:40, and should that really support this view on illegal immigration?
Yeah, this is a little bit complex. I don't want to say it's very simple, and I don't want to say it's ultimately clear to everybody. How about that?
Okay.
But when we're talking about 25:40, we're talking about what Jesus said when he was talking. He was separating the sheep and the goat. The sheep and the goats are separated because the sheep actually fed Jesus when he was hungry, clothed him when he was naked, welcomed him, that kind of thing.
Do you want me to read the passage for us?
No, that's fine. And then the goats, they didn't.
Right.
But the response was the same. The sheep would be like, when do we do this for you?
Right.
And then he would say this until 40. And then on the other side, the goats would say, when do we not do this to you? And then, he would respond, those people who didn't do for the least of these. So who are the least of these? And so people have been trying to figure out who the least of these are.
Yep.
And people will say things like, well, the least of these are people who are on the lowest rungs of the social ladder.
Right.
People who are literally the poorest of the poor. They're the least of these. So if you do that for the poorest of the poor, you're doing it. It's the same thing as doing it for Jesus. There's another camp that will say they want to interpret this as this is about Christians. So you need to do this for other Christians.
Like the least of the brothers.
Least
sisters.
of the brothers in the church.
Right.
And that's who Jesus is talking about.
Okay.
And there's another camp that thinks that, and this camp is wrong. This is the way Tim Walz used it. This is about anybody that's poor in the entire world. Anybody. It could be in Haiti. You have to do it for the least of these. You need to do that for them.
Yeah.
I'll just go outright and say that is the wrong one. But now when we say, do we do it for Christians only? Is that what Jesus meant? Or those that are in, our country legally, meaning, they went through the immigration process. They did everything by the law. And then we need to help them. See, that part isn't clear. And that's where I don't want to, say this is exactly this. But I will tell you priority-wise how we ought to approach it and how we approach it in our church. You save your family first, and then you are strong enough to save others. If you can't even manage your own household, you cannot be an elder. There's a principle there that you need to recognize. So you want to manage the church, well, you manage your household. If you cannot manage your household, you cannot manage the church. And then you can't go out. There's definitely a disseminating kind of help that we see in the Bible. And so when you talk about, broad theology, if you can't even help, let's say, if you can't love your wife and you say, oh, I love all women, that is the most ridiculous statement. You know that's the most ridiculous statement. Mm-hmm. If you truly want to love other women and other men properly, love your wife.
Right.
That's what it is.
Right.
And if you love your wife truly and you can give her that singular, very specific, separated love, you can now give that love to other people, a love to other people that's not like your wife,
right,
but it is still
distinct.
Love.
Right.
Distinct, that's a great word.
Thank you.
In the same way, when we see that you're supposed to do it for the least of these, you have to make sure that it's the least of your family. So who's the hungriest? Who's the weakest? If you have a newborn, there you go. And then you go to your church because that's how it continues to go outward from there.
Yeah.
And then if you could do that, which you ought to, then you should go to even those that are in there. And then when we're talking about people in Haiti, no, man, that's not how it works, because we did the immigration podcast and he's like, well, shouldn't we say by that logic, we should help everybody in the world? The answer is absolutely not. I don't think people understand foreign policy or how even the world works if we think that by us pouring in millions of dollars from our taxpayer money is actually helping other countries, is doing anything. Pouring money is not helping. It's actually feeding them. It's actually clothing them. It's actually visiting them. It's actually doing these things that are helping. So even by that metric, you're not doing it when you just say, we're just going to dump a bunch of money or drop food pallets over in these places. That's actually not helping. We saw that in Gaza, where you would drop pallets of food and none of it would go to the citizens, that they would hoard it in these Gazan tunnels. The Hamas will hoard it in these Gazan tunnels, and even though the food would go bad, they still wouldn't give it out to the citizens. That's what we saw, because that's not how actually helping works. You're not feeding them by doing that. It takes. I don't think it takes a lot of wisdom to understand this. I think it takes a basic amount of wisdom to understand this, which is, for some reason, so many people are bereft in, because they can't accept that our initial and primary responsibility isn't to someone, 6,000 miles away. That's not our initial primary responsibility. It's to those that are here. And then as you grow stronger, it's to those that are in the more outer skirts like that. And so when you understand that concept, you understand how evil Marxism is, honestly. Because the Christian ideal is your heart needs to be changed, and then from everything else, you see the sanctification process going. Marxism is everything from the outside needs to change, and then it goes to the inside. It's a completely opposite ideology from Christianity. Christianity is inside out. Marxism is outside in. This is Rousseauian. This is not what we believe. This is not a Christian concept. We don't change the outside, so hopefully our hearts are changed. That's not how things work. We change the inside. Once the inside is changed, it's those that are right next to us. That's why, the priorities we have even as our members is we pray for our family and friends. We pray for those that are closest to us. Yeah. Because we are more responsible for them. And this is why things like, what happened in Western North Carolina.
We're going to talk about that.
Yeah, it kills me. Yeah. It kills me because of what's going on there and how many people have been dying. We can't help our neighbors. And as soon as this happened, we committed even more money to Ukraine. And stuff like that really does hurt me as a citizen, that we can't help those that are inside our borders as a government, and we're prioritizing sending money to Ukraine and things like that.
And I think that was the issue that a lot of people had as of late. And speaking on the Hurricane Helene, devastating the southeast coast of our country, especially the Carolinas, like you said, the biggest accusation that people are having online in terms of towards our government is that the government's not doing anything. The government is not doing anything because we have spent money elsewhere. We've spent money and our attention on the illegal migrants that we have in our country rather than focusing on the Americans that really need help. And when the government wasn't helping, when FEMA wasn't helping, private citizens would go and they would use their own airplanes. They would use their own helicopters to go and rescue people. But the latest I've heard is even that was stopped. And people that were going into these zones to help people on their own were being arrested. And so the government is arresting Americans that are helping because the government won't help the Americans. Mm-hmm. And so they're stopping Americans from helping Americans, and they're not helping Americans. And meanwhile, we're fighting for the rights of the illegal immigrant. And so a lot of people are having issues with this because they're saying, look, this is exactly what you're talking about. What about the progression? What about your neighbor? What about those who are around you? What about your family? We're not helping those people, but we're helping people that have come over here illegally. We're helping them thrive. Meanwhile, we're barely giving any money to people that are actually suffering within our country.
Yeah, so just a matter of semantics. Technically, they're not illegal immigrants. And this is what J.D. Vance pointed out in his debate with the CBP One app. You could go on this app that you download on your phone.
Yep.
And you could apply for asylum, and then you will get amnesty.
Yeah.
So you can be here on this kind of extended temporary stay based on the fact that you came here illegally, yes, and you can say that I am seeking asylum in this country.
Yeah.
Which who won't, right? So there's no court that decides if your amnesty is legitimate, things like that. So technically, they are not illegal immigrants because of what this executive administration is doing, which again, I think is evil, right? And so I think it was the New York Post that reported like $1.4 billion have been spent on illegal immigrants, providing for them and giving them money and food and supplies and housing over the course of the Biden administration. I think the figures this year was $640 million just this year on illegal immigrants that have come. Again, semantics. I still think they're illegal, but semantics is they are just migrants now, not technically illegal because of the CBP One app. But, that can be switched, obviously, with just a wave of the wand, apparently. But because of that, Alejandro Mayorkas said in May that, we're ready for the hurricane season. We have enough money in FEMA. Don't worry about it. And now he came out this past week saying we're out of funds when the first disaster hit, and we're out of funds, and they're worried because more hurricanes are about to come. What are you going to do then? And so obviously people are upset that we have not prioritized our citizens and have been giving it away to these foreign nationals who have entered our country illegally. And that's a fact. They have entered into our country illegally, and then some of them have been flown here apparently by the Biden administration. They have this thing around their necks, which is their papers, which are their papers that people can check to see that actually this executive administration is allowing for all these migrants to come in, saying that, they wanted to come in. We want to grant them amnesty, but as the process goes on, we're going to give them temporary stay, that kind of thing. So there are legal things that they have been doing in obviously what is going against the spirit of the law, right? And so, those are things that we are seeing. It's chaos. What I find very, very sad are those people that have died, that have been waiting, stranded on rooftops with their grandparents, their children, and they're dying because no aid has come to them, and no aid can come to them because they're stranded at either the ports or the helicopter, the landing, the airstrips, because they just don't have money or funds to go. And now we're hearing reports of the government trying to bar even citizens from helping citizens. It's a very sad and obviously upsetting thing to see where people are dying so much and being harmed so much by regulation by really foolish and unwise policies, red tape unnecessarily put there for no apparent reason, but for the fact that they just want to hold power. And that's what Marxist governments do, though. It's about holding power. And you put red tape, you put all these regulations in place, not because it's good for the people, but because you want to hold power. You want to harness that power. And so even if you want to do good, you got to go through the government. Why? Just because. You want a drone because you can't reach the flooded roads to give food to a house that's stranded on a mountaintop. You can't. You know why? We've banned people from even using drones, in the airways there, because government needs to use those airspaces. Except the government's not using those airspaces because they don't have any funds. But you still can't use the airspaces because regulation. And so those things have been entirely frustrating for people to witness. And it's very sad. Yeah. It is very sad. It is upsetting. And I think people are rightfully upset that we have been pouring in over $1 billion to people that have come here illegally without using the right processes, taking advantage then of our taxpayer money and system. And then we don't have enough, when the time comes, we don't have enough to help our own citizens.
So the accusation isn't that the government used the FEMA money for the illegal migrants, but the accusation is that our government is spending so much money, time, and effort and attention in supporting and in helping these illegal migrants instead of, in lieu of, maybe even helping our own citizens. That's the accusation, right?
It's not just the money. It's manpower. It's even strategy. It's even just like thinking about what to do. All your resources are not directed toward this insane amount of migrants that have come into our country.
Yeah.
So everything's tied up.
Yeah.
Money's tied up. People are tied up. Organizational resources are tied up, like even foods and all these things are all tied up.
Yeah.
Because that's where we've poured all our focus on.
Right.
And so that is the accusation. It's not just simply money, although it is. And then, the Department of Homeland Security and FEMA denied these allegations, except they haven't said anything to disprove them. They just deny it. I don't even know what that means. They're just a heaping dumpster fire right now.
Yeah.
They're a mess. And so, these are things that we are looking at. When you continue to adopt Marxist principles, when you continue to think, when you don't understand the very, very basic notion of you have to help your own citizens, you have to help your own family, that's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's a biblical thing. It's a very basic, natural principle, Yeah. We see this in nature. It's so obvious, A lion doesn't just go and help other random cubs when they leave their own cubs exposed. That's insanity. That doesn't make any sense.
No.
Why can't we even think this kind of basic naturalistic principles? We can't think in these terms because there's a veil over our eyes. It's judgment. It's absolutely the judgment of God, where you don't even know what's up and down, left and right. And these are the things that we want to continue to hopefully do in our podcast, is continue to remind people what's up and down, left and right, why even we go through the most basic things. And so some people might even roll their eyes. Why do they have to go through the most basic things? Because the basic things are what we've lost. We've lost the basic things. Like if you're a mother, your primary responsibility is to your child, to your newborn, to feed, clothe, nurture, give warmth, shelter to, not some other child. Why does that need to be said? Unless we've lost that. We've lost that very basic naturalistic principle. We've lost the natural order. And now mothers are just killing their children, saying, this is my body, my choice. We've lost that natural principle. And that's where we see the whole society starts to crumble, because we don't even have the basic foundations of it. That's why people don't understand. Why should we not help the illegal immigrant? What are you talking about? Help your family first. Help those in our country first. Help those that are citizens. Help them first. Make sure we have enough for them. And if we have left over, then so be it. We should help the others. But that's not how we function.
Yeah.
And so that is a terrible thing. People think this is an altruistic thing that we've done in our country to help these poor illegal immigrants. Listen to our immigration podcast and see how we prove there, and we show with statistics, we show with the numbers and the reports that are out there that this actually harms not just our country, it harms the other country as well that we're receiving immigrants from when we do things like this. And so you're actually doing worse. And this is something that we have to prove in debate. We have to prove. We have to prove with discussion. But this is not something that has been open to discussion. People will just label you a bigot or something, a racist, if you don't. It's because of white supremacy that we won't accept illegal immigrants. So if you just label and name call, you are actually discouraging any kind of fruitful discussion.
Yeah.
And so that's what people have been doing, which is a shame. It's to our great loss.
So knowing that as the people that are suffering right now are our neighbors in the sense of they are our countrymen, how can we support them? How can we help them?
I mean, this is something that we continue to do. We want to continue to pray for them. We want to continue to support them in whatever we can. I do know of a great parachurch ministry. So right now, there's a guy named Gabriel Hughes. I don't know if you know who he is, but he does the, when you know the text, little clips. Yeah, when we understand the text. That's it. When we understand the text, he does those little videos. He's the pastor somewhere. He actually tweeted out the other day that who's mostly helping the storm victims? It's churches, Christians, conservatives, and parachurch organizations.
Yeah.
Who's not helping? FEMA, LGBTQ+, the ACLU, climate activists, Black Lives Matter, Planned Parenthood, Freedom from Religion, or the World Economic Forum. Those guys are not helping people that have been affected by Hurricane Helene. Absolutely true. Pray, understand what's going on, and the way we can help is we can actually, if you want to do more and you want to help people that are on the ground helping now, Samaritan's Purse.
Oh, I had that right here.
Is doing, they're awesome. I mean, Franklin Graham is doing an amazing job. As soon as this happened, he started to mobilize. And he started sending groups out there. You can donate to them if you have money that you can donate. I think the most important thing, obviously, is prayer and keeping this in your hearts and praying for those that have lost their loved ones. I sent you a video of a mother talking about the 7-year-old that she lost, and you said, I can't watch it. But she was describing his life and how beautiful his life was. He was always a happy baby. Yeah. And as he was swept away, he yelled out, "Save me, Jesus." And so she believes in all his heart that Jesus saved him.
Yeah.
It's so sad. Yeah. It's so sad to lose your child.
Yeah.
And it's even sadder that this could have been possibly prevented had we allocated the resources that we have to the proper places of need. And yet we haven't, because we have opened our borders. We have welcomed this kind of chaos into our cities, into our country. And now we are dealing with a mess which nobody apparently will take responsibility for. Who's taking responsibility over this influx of illegal immigrants? Who's taking? Did Biden or Harris say this is my fault, guys? Let me clean it up.
No.
And so who's taking responsibility over this? And so this is entirely an evil thing that we are witnessing. It's a very sad thing. And so continue to pray, I would say, number one, and give to these organizations that are out there that are helping. And I think Samaritan's Purse is a great one.
Thank you for that, Pastor Eugene. And we'll continue to keep our brothers and sisters in the Carolinas in prayer. We thank you for listening to this episode of the Dear Church podcast. Join us next week as we continue this conversation. Next week. We hope and pray that this has been a blessing in your ears. Fight the good fight, finish the race, keep the faith. Peace.